of be the cloud hacker, and then obviously day 2 we'll beat the cloud hacker. So I say appreciate everyone joining. I'm going to do a quick introduction around myself and Bytes and our relationship with Sophos. Hand over to Gennaro, who's also on the call today and will actually be taking part in the event from our technical side, and then also hand over to the guys at Sophos. So I'm Mark Simmons. I'm one of the cybersecurity specialists here at Bytes. I've been here for 4.5 years, and since joining Bytes, I've been a core part of our cybersecurity division and managing our relationship with Sophos, which has stemmed back for about 10 plus years. So within Bytes, we have our dedicated security team delivering over £100 million worth of business through our customers. It's quite a substantial business and a growing part of our organisation. Our relationship with Sophos has gone from strength to strength over the last few years, enabling us to win a couple of awards over the last few years, and the latest one would be around Cloud Partner of the Year, doing events like this. Although this is the first one that we've done, which is actually around hacking and actually looking at red team and blue team. So without further ado, I'm going to shut up, pass over to Gennaro for a bit of an introduction and talk around the technical capabilities we have at Bytes as well.
Perfect, thanks Mark, and good afternoon everyone. So just in a way of a very quick introduction, Gennaro Miaccio, I'm one of the cybersecurity pre-sale specialists here at Bytes. So come from a bit more of a technical background, but still work alongside the same team as Mark. And I suppose after the over the last couple of years, definitely worked with Sophos quite a bit and quite closely, given their presence and capabilities in the security market. So I suppose in terms of today, as Mark mentioned, I am here to partake in the event. I am here primarily to hack. I think a lot of us are probably sharing the same objective here, but just wanted to give a quick overview of our technical capabilities. I'm only one of the techies here at Bytes. We do have quite a vast security team and technical team that's a mixture of pre and post sales consultants, with a number of delivery and support staff in the mix. So this allows us to work closely with our vendors to ensure that we're not only in a position to recommend these solutions, but also be part of that end-to-end project when it comes to recommendation, delivery, planning, architecting, and of course supporting that technology. And of course, we work with Sophos quite closely. We do have a number of top-tier accreditation with Sophos and a number of other market-leading vendors, and these are all vendors that we recommend and work quite closely with. Anyway, hopefully that serves as a very brief overview. I think that's enough about me. I don't know about you guys. I'm definitely eager to get my hands on Kali again. It's been a while since I've used anything Unix and Linux, so I'm going to hand over to Sophos, and let's hack away.
Thanks for that, Gennaro. I am going to quickly share my screen. And hello, everybody. I am Radhika from Sophos. I work at Sophos as a pre-sales engineer and also a cloud security architect. I've been working with Sophos for quite a while now, almost 4 years. And so today we'd be hosting the session along with Nick. So Nick, can you quickly say hi?
Yeah, thanks, Radhika. Yeah, afternoon, everyone. Nick Ross, I'm a channel sales engineer, so I've been working with Bytes, supporting them from a pre-sales perspective for a number of years. So yeah, also excited to be involved today.
Perfect. With everything said, I would like to welcome you again. So this is Be the Hacker, Beat the Hacker Cloud edition of workshop, which also means that we have various other editions, which also include endpoints. But today we're going to look into cloud and how you can actually get onto hacking into AWS cloud. So what is it? It is essentially a 4-hour immersive training session. So it's just going to be around what tools can you actually use to infiltrate networks such as AWS. And believe me, that's not a very difficult thing to run through. So we are going to recreate live attack scenarios today, and we're going to see as to how you would be as an attacker. So this is essentially what the agenda looks like. But for today, it's actually broken down into two parts. We're going to cover the first part, which is being the red team. And in the second half of it, we are going to cover blue team exercise, which is going to be tomorrow. So let's get cracking on. Um, just to introduce you, here are some session assistance control. So I'm sure all of us are on Zoom. So you'd be able to see a yes and a no checkbox under your participants list. So please help us with a yes checkbox after you've completed the task, and help us with a no checkbox if you're facing challenges with anything. So you can also post your queries or anything that you'd want to clarify in the chat box. So we have Nick with us today, who's going to help you out with all your queries on the chat. So feel free to ask any question regarding the session that you really want to clarify. So with that, let the fun begin. So of course, for hacking anything, the first point is of course to get information on which company you'd want to hack. So today, our first job is to be that bad guy or girl, and using the information that we've gained from their website, we'll actually see if we can, exploit some vulnerabilities to steal data from their AWS accounts. Now, of course, you can see that this capital to financial services should ring a bell, because there was a recent attack that actually happened to one of the companies with a similar name in AWS, which actually gained quite a traction. So we are actually going to replicate a similar scenario, which makes it more interesting. With that, let us look as how the setup for today really looks like. So each of our AWS environments have been already pre-provisioned with a Kali Linux machine and also an attacker VM. So we already have the VM installed on which you're going to attack today. This is just for the simplicity of this session. So we already have the attacker VM in capital to already provisioned. We're going to look at the surface area of this EC2 instance and see as to what information can we gain or what vulnerability can we exploit. So after we find a vulnerability, we will see as to what roles are associated with this EC2 instance. So I'm sure roles are generally associated with EC2 instances or Lambda or an S3 service. So we are going to try and find if this role is associated with any other Lambda or any other S3 bucket that the attacker can then use. And once we do find that it has an access, we are going to see if we can find permanent credentials to the environment, because permanent credential will then enable you to log into this environment at any point and any time in the day. So this is actually what we're looking for. We're going to look for permanent credentials to this capital to financial services organization. So once we do find permanent credentials, the other thing is we are going to check if we can escalate the privileges of this particular user and check if we can exploit anything in their own network. So this is exactly the gist of what we're going to do today. And for simplicity and for following it along, we've actually broken down this entire setup into tasks. So here's what the setup looks like. We have an attacker workstation provisioned for you. We have attacker workstation in the form of a Kali Linux machine. We have the victim, which is the EC2 instance. For tomorrow's session, we already have Cloud Optics account that is provisioned for us to be the defenders. And to start to gain access, here's the URL that you should have received as an email with the credentials with your own trainee environments. So I would request you to go on to your browser and copy this URL. And once we do that, I would just want to make you acquainted as to what the lab overview looks like. BTH Web App 2 is the target VM or the victim VM, in fact. Kali Linux is going to be our attacker VM. We're going to host all the attacks using Kali Linux onto another BTH Web App 2 target VM. We have a couple of S3 buckets lying along into the Capital 2 financial services, and we're going to check if we can gain some useful information and earn some money. So for today, the task 0 is of course to log on into your into this URL, and once you do, I will do it along. So right. I hope you can see my screen with a BTH class webapps.com/start. If not, please feel free to let me know. But I'm right now opening the URL. So once you log on with your trainee username and password, this is the screen that you should that should appear. And go ahead and click on Management Console.
Just to interject here, Radhika, if anyone on the call is having problems logging on with their credentials, or you need to check what your credentials should be, then send me a private message on the Zoom chat.
Okay. Thanks, Nick. So this is the AWS Management Console. A couple of things that need to be really kept in mind is all our machines, our attacker VM and our target VM are actually provisioned in US West Oregon. So please change the region to US West Oregon from this place if it isn't selected already. Because if you select any of the other regions, you wouldn't be able to find your EC2 instances running. So region is really, really important. The other important thing to remember is that while we open Session Connect in EC2, which you're going to do very shortly, it should be in the full resolution because EC2 Session Connect usually breaks the line. So please make sure that you have a full screen on your AWS Management Console. So this is something that's very important because down the line, when we actually run commands, it may break your command and AWS may throw an error to you. So if you've reached this point, I would really appreciate if you could just give us a thumbs up and let all of us know if you're with us. And if not, please feel free to put anything in the chat box.
Radhika, just to let you know as well, Dale and I have been chatting in the background. I think because we're using our friends at Bytes as a Zoom environment, we don't actually, or the delegates don't have the ability to use the reaction settings that we would normally see. I think that's a meeting option that's not turned on, unfortunately.
Sure. So, Nick, can you sync with maybe Mark to help us if there's anything we can do about it?
I'll see if that can be switched on during the meeting. Alternatively, as I say, in the meantime, if everyone's having any problems, just send me a message directly.
Of course. So please feel free to use the chat option in case you're not able to log on or you're not able to see anything or you'd want us to slow down. Chat would be the best way to go. Cool. Sure. So this was actually what our task 0 was, which is to make sure you have US West Oregon selected as your region. And also to make sure that you have full resolution open for your Kali SSH machine. So now since we've reached this point, let us go ahead and look at our EC2 instances, ensuring that you have Oregon region selected. Let's go and look at EC2. So you should actually see two instances running, as we discussed, as Kali is going to be the machine from which you're going to launch attacks, and BTH Web App 2 is going to be the victim machine. So make sure that you see two machines. If not, feel free to put that into the chat box. And with that, let us look as to how we are going to use the Kali Linux machine to launch attacks. So select the Kali the Kali EC2 instance and click on connect. Once you do that, you'll be able to see EC2 instance connect option. Um, Make sure that you have the username as admin. And once you do that, click on connect. So once you do have this, this is the EC2 session connect, which we are going to use to launch all our attacks. So if you do an ls, you'd be able to find all the tasks listed here from task 1A, 1B, 1C, so on and so forth. So for example, if you really want to see what a task 1A is, you could simply do a cat on that. So it could be cat task 1A. And you'd be able to see the associated instructions out of it. This can be easily copied using your mouse button, which is left mouse button to actually select it, and right to paste this right here. So this is as easy as it can get, where you have all the tasks already listed. So just do an ls, you'll be able to see all the tasks. For opening any of the tasks, use a cat command in front of it, which should give you as to what task we're actually running. With that done, there's another thing that we have throughout the deck is there are text marked in the presentation with a green green text, which actually means that you have to substitute this target IP with the IP in your own environment. So any text which is marked in green would have to be replaced with your own individual account's value. So please keep that in mind while we're running it. And with all the bases really covered, let's get started. So AWS attack chain isn't very different from an on-prem attack chain, which is basically to do a recon and just get information about the target that you're going to exploit. Use some code to get exploitation. Once you have you know exposed cloud credentials, you actually get an initial access. Just after that, you can once you do get this access, you use privilege escalation and laterally move through the AWS environment, and the impact could be really severe, as you've heard in a lot of news that has been going around. And there could be, you could have a S3 bucket being dumped into another environment, a crypto mining, or a denial of service attack. So there are hosts of attacks that you can actually that can actually impact your AWS environment. So with that, let's look at step number one, which would be to to identify the potential targets, determine its surface area as to what ports are open, what services are running. Once we know as to what ports are open, we would then check if there's any vulnerability attached to that open port or service. So if you were an attacker in real world and not as part of the event, if you were somebody who was going to attack in any other company in real world, AWS makes it a little easier for everybody, because they actually publish a list of all their public IPs in all the regions, So every single public IP used by AWS is actually published, and you can actually get hold of that by simply using this command wget https, and it'll give you the range of all the IP addresses ever used. Now, once you have that surface area, what hackers typically do is they pass this list and use certain filters into it. For example, after parsing this list, they could use a filter for a region, or they could use a filter for a service, and this would just give them the public IPs associated with this filters only. So this makes it really easy for an attacker to gain the sort of information that they're looking after, as compared to an on-prem resource. And of course, if you want to list down public IP ranges using EC2 services, you could just use the filter for region and service to be EC2. It's as simple as that. The other thing to note is there are multiple tools already available on internet where you can actually just type in a URL or an IP address and just check whether that IP address is associated. So that is another plus for an attacker in the real world. So if we were to conduct this in real world, here's what we would have done. We would have gotten all the IP ranges. We would have then applied filter onto it to filter down the IP addresses that were of our interest. But for the benefit of this workshop, you would be provided with a victim IP address. So, and please feel free and make a note of your target IP, because that is something that we are going to use. So as you see, this is in green, which also means that you would have to replace this with the value in your own environments. So we are going to begin with task 1C. So please let's go to our AWS session console and click on BTH Web App 2, and you should be able to see your public IP, because this is the IP that we are going to attack using Kali Linux. So let's go back to this and to my instances. Uncheck Kali, check BTH Web App 2, which is the victim for me. And I'm going to quickly note down its IP address. So it's 52.10.91.11. So once you've noted this down, let's go back to our Kali Linux session connect. And let's run our task 1C. So we are going to use target IP very frequently in the sessions. So we made sure to variabilize this. So all we're going to do right now is variabilize our target IP. So you can actually just copy this and paste it. So target IP is equal to the target IP for me is 52.10.91.11. It is definitely going to be some other IP for you. So please substitute this with the BTH Web App 2 public IP and hit enter. And just to check if you variabilize this correctly, you can actually use echo target IP. So it should it should spin out the same target IP that you variabilized. So at this point, are there any challenges that we might want to address? So
Look to be okay so far, Radhika. Sorry, I was just on mute then. Yeah, a couple of people are feeding back in the meantime, but Yeah, just a reminder, if you've got any problems in the meantime while we can't do this meeting feedback, just send me a message directly in the Teams chat if that's okay, in the Zoom chat, I beg your pardon.
Perfect, Nick. So I do see that there was one of the questions as to what public IP it would be. The public IP would be of BTH Web App 2. That is our victim today. So we are going to attack BTH Web App 2. So please click on the checkbox and use public IP address.
Yeah,
That should be different for you. Yeah.
Responded to Peter already on that one. Yeah, all good. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. So with that done, let's see as to what our next step would be. Having the attack surface with us, let's see on how we are going to, use its vulnerabilities. So Nmap is a very, very commonly used tool. I don't know from when. So I think all network and security engineers would have used it once, one or the other time. So it is actually an open source tool which would help you out in determining which ports are open against a specific IP or an EC2 instance. So we're going to do exactly that. What we're going to do is we're going to see as to what ports are actually open against the target IP, against the BTH Web App 2 victim. So let's get back to our EC2 session connect and run a task 2, I think. Yes, cat task 2. So of course, task 2 is to run an nmap. We've already variabilized our target IPs, so it's going to run nmap against 52 against the BTH Web App 2 victim machine. So feel free to copy it and paste it. So it takes a couple of seconds to actually spin out what ports are open. So all right, once you do run nmap and you do get the information, here's the port that is of interest to us because they are open. So if you see port 22, TCP port 22 is in open state, and also TCP port 80 is in open state. Now, having these two ports open, which are very, very commonly used ports, is actually like inviting an attacker into your network. So what we're going to do next is having the information that we now know that there are two ports open, what vulnerabilities could be associated with this. So we are going to look into that very shortly. So if there are any challenges, can you please put that on chat so we can probably, Nick can probably look into it.
All looking good so far, Radhika.
Perfect. Thanks, Nick. So now comes the interesting part, because now what we have found using Kali Nmap is there are two ports open against the victim's public IP. One is port 22, which is SSH, port 80, which is HTTP. So the next logical step would, of course, be to identify the target's vulnerability. So what we are going to do is we are going to use an open source command or a tool which is curl, which I'm sure would have been used quite a lot of times. So we are going to work with AWS EC2 instance metadata. So here's just a description of what EC2 instance metadata is. So whenever you deploy any EC2 machine in your network, and a metadata server automatically gets attached to this EC2 instance. So it is going to happen with all your EC2 instances that you deploy in AWS. So what information does this metadata server have? So this metadata server provides this EC2 instance with information such as its account ID, its private IP address, the instance type, or the role associated with this. So all this information can be provided using this metadata server to this EC2 instance. Now, of course, the question is when and how does it provide? So whenever you run a curl command on this EC2 instance for 169.254, 169.254, and provided with the information that you're looking for, this metadata server associated with EC2 will actually give you back that information. So this is the normal working of AWS, and this is something that we as an attacker are going to exploit today. So for example, if you really want to, check as to what identity credentials are attached to your Kali Linux, you can actually do a curl on your Kali Linux, and this will give you the information identity credentials that are associated with the Kali Linux VM. Another concept that is, that is very familiar with AWS is the concept of AWS IAM roles. So roles are very short-term credentials that are provided and are usually they're associated with an EC2 instance or a Lambda function or an S3. So having these two information with us, we are going to put 1 plus 1 together and check on how the attacker can actually use this information to gain access into the environment of capital 2 services. So server side request forgery, which is SSRF vulnerability, is actually a vulnerability which is induced with TCP, AT, HTTP. So what it really does is the Kali Linux curls and asks the public server on port 80, and this public server in turn asks its metadata server about the information. So once this metadata server provides the information to this EC2 instance, uh, because of SSRF vulnerability, this EC2 instance then provides and relays the information to Kali Linux. This is something that should not happen, but because TCP port 80 HTTP is open on this public server or EC2 instance, we can then use SSRF a forgery attack to gain access into the AWS environment. So we're going to do exactly that. So we are going to, with our Kali Linux VM, the EC2 Session Connect, we already know that TCP port 80 is open on our target VM. We are going to send a request to this EC2 instance, which in turn sends a request to a metadata server. This metadata server will reply back with the information that we're requesting. And because this EC2 instance is actually uh, has a vulnerability SSRF, it is going to relay the information back to Kali Linux. So this is how the entire cycle would really work. So to find whether a particular instance is vulnerable to SSRF or not, uh, we use SSRF map. So what we are going to do is we're going to look into task 3, which is basically to go into SSRF map and check whether our target IP, which is our BTH web app 2 machine, whether or not it is actually vulnerable to SSRF or not. So let's get back to our EC2 Session Connect right here. So what we are going to do right now is we are going to look into cat task 3. So SSRF map is what is used to find whether the particular IP that you're looking for is, does it have the SSRF vulnerability or not? So we are going to change directory to SSRF and run this particular command. So if you notice, we are actually running this against our target IP on our magic IP 169.254.169.254. So if this spins out, directories of SSRF, this would actually mean that our target IP, which is our BTH Web App 2 instance, has the vulnerability of SSRF. So let's quickly, right. So this is exactly what we have done. We found that this target IP is associated with SSRF because it is able to, using the magic IP 169.254.169.254, we are able to see the SSRF folders listed here. So this really concludes that this target IP has SSRF vulnerability. And this for an attacker is gold again, because this means that I can indirectly ask my victim for information that they wouldn't want to share otherwise by using SSRF vulnerability. So now let's see on how we would do that. All right, so we have a SSRF map against port 80, and we found that uh, the BTH Web App 2 instance has SSRF vulnerability. So this is what we've obtained. We started with analyzing the surface area, and we found a public IP. Once we did, we ran an nmap command to check as to what ports are open associated with that public IP. Once we did find that, we were lucky enough to find that port 80 was open. This rings a bell in our minds because there are a lot of vulnerabilities associated with port 80, and one of them is SSRF. So we ran an SSRF map to against the target IP to check whether this had the vulnerability or not, and we did finally find out that our target IP has the SSRF vulnerability. So I'm going to pause for a second and check if there are any questions that we can take or any challenges anywhere.
Yeah, good shout, Radhika. I haven't had any questions directly coming from the guys to suggest that they're having problems with the pace so far, so that's all good. I had a really good question from Peter, just generally regarding the SSRF sort of vulnerability or exploit. I did mention, obviously, there is a new version of the instance metadata service available within AWS that would block the use of this vulnerability. So IMDS version 2. However, as we've seen typically within cyber, a lot of customers don't necessarily switch new features on or make best practice configurations. So we are using that vulnerability as part of this activity.
Of course. And if it was a real customer and they could have actually had a firewall in front of it, which could actually have had a WAF and other techniques turned on into their firewall, which could have actually detected this sort of attack taking place and could have stopped it. So that's why it's always always beneficial to have services like WAF in your network, which could look into an attack or vulnerability such as this.
Perfect.
Thanks, Nick. So with that, now let's look and steal some credentials, because till now we've just found a vulnerability, Now we're going to steal some credentials out of Capital 2 company. So there are a lot of exploitation tools in the market. There's Paku, there's Weirdoll. Uh, so these are actually open source and are available on GitHub for you to check at any point in time. So what we are going to do is we are going to check, we are going to run uh, the the curl command against our target IP and query the metadata server for the security credentials or the roles that are associated with our victim machine, that is our BTH web app 2. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to be a man in the middle sort, because we're going to ask EC2 to query its metadata server for security credentials. Once the metadata server replies back to the EC2, the EC2, because of SSRF, is going to tell the Kali Linux machine of the security credential that is attached to that EC2 instance. So we're going to do exactly that. Let's get on to our EC2 session connect and check as to what role is attached to our target IP. But before we do that, let's do this.
Yeah, we're good. Radhika, I'm just messaging Bahar at the moment regarding the target IP variable, but it seems like they've sorted that. So I think we're good to proceed.
Perfect. And so if you remember, all our tasks are actually located in our home directory. So since you were an SSRF, please make sure that you change back to the home directory to look at your task file. So we are going to run task 4A, which is basically using SSRF vulnerability and getting the security credentials or the role that is attached to our target IP. So it's as simple as copying the command and pasting it. So once we did do that, we see that there was a role associated, which is called a BTH EC2 role. It is a little wonky, I would admit, because the role name gets appended with the prompt, the admin prompt right here. But the role name is of course BTH EC2 role. So we're going to use this role in the further tasks to come. So please make sure that the role name is BTH EC2 role. So voila, we have found some very useful information right now, because we now have temporary credential in the environment of Capital 2 services. Now, as we've already discussed, it is good to have a role, but wouldn't it be best if you can have permanent credentials? But before that, we would need to use the information that EC2 roles are, either associated with with a EC2 instance. They're either associated with an S3 bucket, or they're associated with the Lambda function. Now, for us as an attacker, we actually don't know whether it's associated with an S3 or a Lambda function. So what we're going to do right now is to check whether the role is associated with S3 or Lambda, just so we can get deeper into the environment and find some real gold out of it. So let's see. So we are going to first, obtain the credentials, which is associated with BTH EC2 role. As you see, it's highlighted in green, which means that you would need to substitute it with the role that you've just received, which should be BTH EC2 role. So I will get back to my EC2 session connect. Cat task 4B. I would admit that this is a long command, so it's very, very important that the resolution of the screen is to the maximum, because otherwise it could actually break the command and it would throw out an error to you. So please ensure that. And let's copy it to here. So EC2 role name is BTH EC2 role that you've just received. So let's type that in here. BTH EC2 role, right? Just going to copy the rest of the command. So this is the final command that it should look like. So all we are doing is we already know the name of the role. So we are now using the temporary access key, secret key access ID, and we're putting that in a file output.txt. So this is essentially what we're doing right now. So before we move on, I could see a few questions here. Is there anything that would need our attention, Nick?
Sorry, Dick, just dashing for the mute button there. Yeah, sorry, we're just having a conversation with Ollie regarding the best way of getting a command to fit on one single line. So I think this is something we've seen on previous courses, isn't it? Where if your browser window and the CLI that you're looking at within the AWS dashboard is pushing text down to another line, then sometimes we can get typos. So it might be easier to set a higher resolution so that you can fit the command on one single line.
Perfect. So, right, just as Nick mentioned, make use of the full resolution in your browser, because EC2 Session Connect isn't very friendly, I would say, with
That's
AWS.
probably the nicest way of putting it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, all right. So I think we do have everybody up to this point. So all I'm going to do is just enter this command. So once you do that, you would of course see that this is the information that is of importance to us, and we've fed that into output.txt file. So we have the access key ID, we have the secret access key, and we have the token. Now, as we discussed, roles are temporary, and so they have tokens associated with this. So what it really means is, if you were, as an attacker, if you would want to go and have a quick coffee or go for a short supper, uh, it would mean that after half an hour or 1 hour, when you get back, you may not be able to use these same credentials, which also mean that by the time you actually get back and get back from your tea, the defender would have already spotted and blocked this vulnerability. So for me as an attacker, this is not an ideal way to attack. I'm going to get further into the environment to find permanent credentials, because permanent credentials are credentials you can use at any point and any day. So with that, let's look at what our next tasks are going to be. So here's where we are at. We were on our Kali Linux machine on EC2 Session Connect. We found a public IP. We found a port associated with it, which is port 80, which was open. We found a vulnerability called SSRF. Using SSRF vulnerability, we found a role that is associated with EC2 instance, which is called BTH EC2 role. What we did, we also grabbed the access key, secret access key, and session token, because what we really want to achieve out of this attack is permanent credentials, which we can use at any point in time. So before we achieve that, we would have to see that this role is attached to which other things. So they could either be attached to an S3, or they could either be attached to, a Lambda function. So we are going to do exactly that. We're going to use AWS CLI interface. So AWS CLI interface is very much similar to any console that you've used. So any general console that you use would ask you for a username and a password, but AWS CLI actually asks you for a couple of things, which includes access key ID, secret key access ID, and token in case if it is a role that is associated. Now, how do you gain access to an environment using AWS CLI? So there are two methods to load your credentials into AWS CLI to access your AWS environment. So one of the method is using AWS configure. So using AWS configure, it will ask you for the access key ID. It will ask you for the secret key access ID, the region name, and format. So once you feed this information, you would then be able to get hold of that particular environment to which this role is associated. And the second method is feeding this information directly into a hidden file, which is AWS credential file. So you can actually use the second method as well to, feed in your AWS access key ID, secret key access ID, and session token. So we are going to use this second method to feed in the information of the role that we have just received to get into capital 2's environment, to get into their own environment. So let's do that. So before we do that, we would just need to do a few things, which is to variabilize this. So we're going to go back to our task 4C. So this is simply the information that we've received right here. We are converting that into variables so that it becomes easier for us to use in further tasks. So it's just copying this information into access key variable. So all you have to do is just copy this command, paste it, run enter. Secret key, paste it and run enter, and token. All right. And just to check if everything has been variabilized correctly, we could actually use echo. So if you use echo a $access key, this is same as the access key here. So in this task, we're doing nothing other than just variabilizing the information that we've received. So if there are any challenges, can you put that down in chat for us, or any questions that we can take?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything at the moment, Radhika, but I'll keep you posted.
All right, perfect. So at this point in time, you have actually stolen the first set of credentials, which is a role that was associated with our target machine. So once we do that, we are going to use and put the access key ID, secret key access ID into our AWS credential file. So as we discussed previously, you can put credentials of the environment either using AWS configure, or you could put that using AWS credentials. So all the access key, secret key access ID, and everything else that we've just received, we are going to output that into AWS credentials file. What we need to make sure is that this is done in the exact order so that you don't miss any of the order given here, because AWS actually sees these credential file in the order that is mentioned. So if you actually mistakenly, you type AWS secret access key ID before access key ID, you would not be able to run the further task because AWS will not accept it in an incorrect format. So please make sure that it is in perfect order. If in case not, please feel free to put that in chat, and Nick and I could help you in figuring that out later. But order is really, really important. So all we're doing is putting access key ID and everything else into our AWS credentials file. So let's quickly.
One thing to note as well, Radhika, sorry, is that if any of the people on the call get booted off, perhaps they disconnect from their AWS dashboard session and they have to come back in again, these variables won't remain. They'll need to set these variables up again. So if that happens, let us know.
Of course. Thanks, Nick. So let me go back what we were running, and that was cat task 5. So essentially, as we discussed, we're going to feed all the information about the role that we've received into the AWS credentials file so that we make it usable and we actually get into the environment of a capital 2 company. So make a directory, and then we provide the name of the role, which is victim EC2 role. So first goes the name. Second goes the access key ID. And then the secret access key. And then the region. The output, and finally the AWS session token. So this is the exact order that you should feed the access key, secret key, access ID into your AWS credential file. To check if that is in order, let's go here. Let's go to AWS credential file to check. Right. So if you do a cat /.aws/credentials, which is a hidden directory, just to note, you should be able to see something like this. So the name of the role is victim EC2 role. The access key ID, secret key access ID, region, output, and session token. Please make sure it's in this particular order. If there are any questions, please put that in the chat box and we'll get to it as soon as we can. So I guess everything is sorted on our end, Nick.
Yeah, all looks good here.
All right, perfect. So we have stolen our first temporary credential. We have then outputted that credential into our AWS credentials file. So now that AWS CLI has this AWS credential file, we are now into capital 2 environments own AWS infrastructure, because now you have provided it with the information that was needed. So So of course, do a cat tilde AWS credentials to check whether you have that particular order that we discussed. If not, we would need to remove the credentials and start over. So here's where we are at. We've found a role of using Kali, exploited the vulnerability, found a role. Now, after finding the role, we want to check as to what next is it associated with. Is there a Lambda function that we could take or we could make use of, or is it an S3 bucket that is further associated with this role? So that is a question that we would need to check. So we are going to look for credentials and hotspots, which would, the first hotspot is of course an S3 bucket. So we are using the credentials, the credentials that we've just obtained for capital 2 company. We're going to check if that credential is, whether it's associated with the S3 bucket or not. So let's get back to our EC2 session connect and run our cat task 6. Whoops, sorry. There we go. So the task 6A is basically to check that this role that we've just obtained, that we've just stolen from capital 2 company, whether or not it is associated with S3 or not, whether it can list down the S3 buckets in capital 2 environment or not. So all we've got to do is copy this, hit enter. And we haven't really found luck because this gives us an access denied, and this actually means that this role is not associated with S3 because I cannot actually list down the S3 buckets. For me, as an attacker, this makes me disheartened. But what we are going to do is we're going to check if it is associated with a Lambda function or not. So this is exactly what our task 6B is. So using AWS Lambda list functions, I'm going to check whether the credentials that we've just fed in, whether or not they're able to list down the Lambda functions or not. And if you notice, this is in square sort of brackets. So this needs to be replaced with the region, which is US-West-2. So we're going to do just that. Copy this. Provide it the region US West 2. And why US West 2? Because the target, which is our BTH Web App 2, which is in our capital 2 company, is provisioned in US West 2 region. So please make sure that you replace deployment region with US West 2. So I'm going to pause here for a little while to check if everybody is with us. If not, if you're having any challenge, please put that in the chat box and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Radhika. Neil and a few other people were just wanting to re-go over the variable, the credential variable settings, just because there were typos or bits missing. So I've explained how to delete the credential file and start again. If anyone else is having any problems with that, when you echo to the screen, it doesn't quite look right, then obviously let us know.
Perfect, Nick. So I'm going to pause for a little while just so that all of us are on the same pace. So in case, as Nick really mentioned, in case you have input this in an incorrect order, use rm space / AWS credentials as Nick mentioned, and this should actually remove your file, and you should then start over again. So this means putting a victim EC2 role again and basically run task 5 again. So we're just going to take a 30-second pause so that everybody is on point with us, and feel free to post anything in chat.
Can you just, Radhika, sorry, can you just confirm what tasks are up to at the moment? Because I think some people are running further ahead, which is great, by the way, but I just wanted to make sure we're all kind of keeping pace. So we're on task 6B at the moment, yeah?
Yes.
So I know some of the guys have obviously run ahead, which is great. Don't want to discourage you from looking ahead, but yeah, just if you're struggling with some of the later labs, just hold fire, if that's okay.
All right. Thanks, Nick. So just a 30-second break for everybody to catch on. If you have any questions until CAT task 6B, please put that in the chat and we will begin in 30 seconds. All right. Hi again. I'm not sure if 30 seconds are over, but I don't really see any messages in the chat, which is actually a great news because all of us are on and up to task 6B. Feel free to let us know on the chat in case you have any questions. So, right, what we were doing, we were actually trying to find out whether the credentials, whether they have access to AWS Lambda function or not. So what we really did is we replaced the deployment region with US West 2. So I'm going to quickly press and enter to check. All right. So once you have this, you should notice some really interesting bits of information. And what I mean by that is this right here. So somebody has accidentally, has left permanent credentials, access key ID, and secret key ID into the Lambda function. While you may be surprised that why would anybody do that, it is fairly common to just accidentally leave them through, so that the testing becomes quicker and there's no complication involved in assigning a policy to a row, a policy to a user, and then a user to a Lambda. So what people really do is they just leave these permanent credentials lying around. So this, for a capital 2 company, is disastrous. And for us as an attacker, this is, I don't know, this is platinum, I guess. So this is platinum information because we have found permanent credentials into the environment. So this is great news. So if you've found this, this is an absolutely great news for an attacker because now he or she has finally access to permanent credentials. To make this a little easier to read through, you can also use the JQ format, which is essentially JSON. So it becomes a little user friendly to read. So I'm just going to do that. -2. All right. So these are the variables that we were mentioning. And this is, this is something that could be really, really disastrous because it is permanent set of credentials. So now as an attacker, I'm really, really happy. Now let's see as to what further we can do about it. So we checked whether the temporary credentials had access to S3. We unfortunately didn't find any luck and there was no access to S3. We also tried to find out if the temporary credentials had access to Lambda function. And once we did that, we came to know that there were some permanent credentials embedded into the Lambda function. So here's where we are overjoyed. And uh, please record the access key ID and secret key ID, because we would need we are going to now use the permanent credentials. So here's where we are at. We used SSRF vulnerability and found a role associated with our victim machine. We ran a list command for S3, and unfortunately we didn't find any S3 buckets, but we actually found Lambda buckets associated. And using the Lambda and into the Lambda function, we actually found some hard-coded credentials. So now we are now going to use those permanent credentials that we have found, because temporary credentials can expire at any given time, and that would be bad news for us. And that would also mean that all the work that we have done is of no use, because till now you've not gained any money out of it. Now that we have permanent credentials, we are going to use those credentials to get into Capital 2's environment. And for that, we are going to use another method, which was AWS configure, to put those credentials into AWS CLI. So now let's load the credential into AWS environment. So these credentials are the second set of credentials, but they are permanent credentials, and that is what makes the most difference. So let's quickly get back here and run task 7. So as we discussed, we are just going to feed in the permanent credentials into AWS CLI so that it doesn't time out, unlike roles. So we have actually named this as victim Lambda cred. So, oops. So once you press enter, it will ask you for your AWS access key ID. So access key ID is this, but please make sure you do not include the quotes and neither the comma here. So it should just be the value. So it should just be the alphabet of value that you see without quotes and without a comma. So AWS access key ID goes here. So AWS secret access key goes here. So again, the commas associated with this are not to be used. It's just the values that should be inputted into it, and click enter. The default region name could be US West 2, and default output format could be JSON. So now we've actually fed permanent credentials into our AWS CLI. So are there any queries that we can take? You can probably help us with any challenges that you're having by using the chat box.
All looks good this end, Radhika. I think that some of the guys who obviously run ahead had a few questions regarding task 8A, but I think we'll come to that bit next, obviously.
Yeah, perfect. Sure. Thanks, Nick. So with that, we actually have fed the permanent credentials into our AWS environment, and here's where we are at again. Found SSRF vulnerability, found a role attached to it. Using the role, we found whether an S3 or a Lambda function was associated, and we found gold when we found that there were permanent credential in the Lambda function. So this was the permanent credentials that we really found. So now we replaced and put these permanent credentials so that we have access to capital tools, capital to financial services environment, and we can use that at any given day and at any given point, and it doesn't actually expire. So that is excellent news for us. So now that we have reached where we have, we've stolen the credentials, we're going to look as to what these credentials can, how they can actually help. Because of course, the end result for an attacker is to, earn some quick money. So that is, I think, one of the main goals. So for us, our goal is the same, just to gain some information which we can actually sell off to the dark web and earn some money. So we're going to do exactly that. We're going to check as to where these permanent credentials are in the capital 2 environment, on what they're attached to, and how can I gain access. So AWS again makes it a little easier for an attacker to actually determine the permissions of the credentials. And how do they do that? Uh, so there's an enumerate IAM, that can be used. So not only will they give out the permissions that are associated with the credentials, it also will tell you whether those permissions worked or not. So I think uh, AWS couldn't actually have helped more than that. But for us as an attacker, this is absolutely gold, because not only do we know as to what permissions are associated with our permanent credentials, we are also going to find out whether whether those permissions worked or not, using the tool called Enumerate IAM. So let's get back. This is cat task 8A. So yeah, let's get back to our EC2 session connect. And cat task 8A. So we're going to change directory to enumerate IAM. As you see, you would need to replace this with your own access key ID of your own environment and your own secret access key. So let me copy up to this point. The access key ID is the permanent credential that we've just found, so should be this. There goes the secret key, which is this. Oops. So my EC2 session connect isn't.
It's pasted twice, I think, hasn't it?
Yes. All right, perfect. So so we are going to run enumerate IAM against the permanent credentials to see what permissions it has, and also if those permissions worked or not. So you're right. I think I did find one of the messages in the chat. This is a small bug at this moment, and this actually doesn't break out itself. So so just to break out of it, you would just need a Control Z. So we do see that there are a whole lot of IAM privileges that this user really has. So now we're going to use those IAM privileges to escalate the privilege of the current user, and then check if there's something interesting that we can earn money off. And before that, please change the directory to home directory, because that would enable us to run the further tasks. So cd space tilde is going to get you back to the home directory. So now we using enumerate IAM, we found that there are things that are IAM permissions attached. So let's see on how the attacker could essentially use those. So of course, use a control Z to break out of it, because that is a small bug, and return to the home directory using cd tilde so that you can view the other tasks. Oops. All right. So now we are at a point that we are going to look at the IAM permissions that are attached to our permanent credentials that we had named as victim lambda cred. So let's go on and get into task 8B. And policy ARN is something that's going to be used, so make sure you note that, and also the username. So the username that actually gets displayed would be used in the next command to find out what policies are associated with that username. So please make sure that whatever username you get out of this command is copied right here. So let's get on to our task 8B. So apart from the fact, we're just getting the details of this victim lambda cred. So I just need to find out the username, because that is something that I'm going to use further, and also the policy ARN, which is this. So the only interesting bits of information is username and ARN, because that will help me to run further commands to get what IAM privileges exactly does this user have. So now we're going to run this, and the username would be this. I know it's a little different because AWS generates it itself. So go ahead and paste that and use profile victim lambda cred, paste enter. So it just gives out as to what policy, the name of the policy that is attached to our username, and what the policy ARN is. So this is just a bit of information that is required. So what we're going to do is we are going to variabilize this policy ARN, because that is going to be used further down in our commands to check and escalate privileges. So I'm just going to quickly variabilize the policy ARN that we've received. All right. And having done that, I'm going to check that what policy is associated with our victim lambda cred profile. So there we go. All right. So here's where it gets interesting. And why is that? So there are a couple of information that is very, very interesting. One is that the version ID of this is V1. So a victim lambda cred has may or may have other versions as well, just looking after the name of it. And the other bit of information that is very, very helpful for us as an attacker is that if this policy has other versions attached to it, the flag for attaching other versions is true, which means that if this policy had other versions, you can actually change those versions and attach those versions to your this Lambda policy. So this is the interesting bit of information, and this should generally be false. And we're going to run this through in our Defender portion tomorrow. Uh, but as it goes, Capital 2 company did not look into it and did not have proper Defender scenarios available, and that is why they actually left this as true. So now what we're going to do is we're going to find out if there are other versions available. So I'm going to use AWS IAM list policy versions to actually list down what policy versions are attached to victim Lambda cred. So this, and voila, there's some really very very important information and really good news for an attacker, because we've now found that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 versions of a policy available. So this could actually have been mistakenly left by somebody working off, uh, and they forgot to delete the versions. But for an attacker such as us, this is great piece of information which we can actually use. And also we also know that we can attach these policies to this profile, because this flag right here is attachable is true. So had this been false, we couldn't have attached and replaced the policy for victim Lambda cred. But as it goes, we are in luck today. So if you see, there are couple of things here, which is version ID and whether this is the default version or not. So if you see, the default version is v1. So now what I'm going to do is, as an attacker, I'm going to try and find out on what v2, v3, and v4 policies really look like. And the one which has the least restrictive permissions, I'm going to use that and change it uh, to that version, to this credential. So that is exactly what I'm going to do. So I'd probably cat that again. Cat task 8b. So I'm first going to look into what policy version v1 looks like. So it has a few privileges, but so it has IAM get, IAM list, and set default policy version, which is why we were able to do the tasks given above. And this is the default version, but this is not of much importance to us. Now let's look if there are other policy versions which are least restrictive, that have more that gives us more access into the environment. So let's look at v2. So v2 has complete access, but it just allows access from a couple of IPs that we see here. So this is not ideal again. Let's look through as what our version ID v3 looks like. And this is absolutely good news for us, because if you see here, we see that the action is star, effect, allow, and resource any. So this is a star AWS policy that had been lying around and hadn't been deleted. So for us as an attacker, this is absolutely good news.
I guess, sorry, Radhika, just to chip in here, I guess that's a bit like the equivalent of having an any rule on your firewall, basically.
Yep, exactly. That's right, Nick. So this is an absolute good news for us because it has this privileges attached. So, right. So before we proceed further, please feel free to put anything in the chat in case you have any queries, or let us know if we can help you out.
Yeah, it's all looking pretty clear here, to be honest. I asked everyone to shout up if they've got any concerns. I think the couple of questions around 8A have probably been resolved now because you showed how to break out of that process. So unless anyone's got anything they want to message me about, it looks like we're all good.
Perfect. Thanks, Nick. So, and now that we have this information available, where we found that version v3 was the least restrictive of everything, we are going to, of course, change those privileges. We are going to attach v3 to our victim lambda cred so that this gives access to the entire wide, capital to financial services org. So getting back to this and running task 9. So we are doing exactly what we discussed and what an attacker would, logically do, which is to set the default policy version, change it from v1 to v3. And why we're changing it to v3? Because this gives a star, star, star. So it gives access to anybody from any resource, and access to anything. So we are quickly going to copy this, press enter. This now means that you have now changed the policy version to v3, which gives you access to the whole wide, capital to financial services AWS environment. So here's where we are at. We used SSRF vulnerability, found a role, found that it was attached to a Lambda service, found some hard-coded permanent credentials embedded into a Lambda function. We used Enumerate IAM to check as to what privileges it may have. We further drilled down into IAM, and we also found that there were, there were 4 policy versions, that were lying around in the environment. And what was interesting was there was a flag is attachable that was set to true, and using that information, we changed from default policy v1 version to policy v3. This means that we have actually moved laterally and we should have access to the entire environment. So now that we have access to the entire environment, most of the most of the confidential informations are usually stored in S3 buckets. So what we're going to do is you're going to try and check whether we have access to S3 buckets or not. So let's get back to our EC2 session connect. Task 10. So after we have changed to version v3, we are going to check and list the S3 buckets, because that is generally where confidential and privileged information generally reside. And we see that there are quite a lot of S3 buckets in the environment. Now, for an attacker, they would actually go through each of these buckets, and they would do a random brute force to check which of these buckets have what information into it. But for the purpose of this event, I'm going to be a little helpful and let you know that this is the bucket that should be, this is the bucket that is important to us. So all of our environments should have a bucket called bth-private followed by the trainee number. So it could be 0, for me, 01 for trainee 1, and 02 for trainee 2, and so on. So we are going to list and we're going to see this trainee, this bucket information. So what we would do is we are going to copy uh, and replace this with the bucket name. And this would actually copy the information from the capital to company's S3 bucket into our own uh, into our own uh, into our own S3 sync directory. So there's sensitive customer information that was in the S3 bucket of capital 2, which we have used and copied this into our Kali Linux machine. So now we have successfully exfiltrated the environment. Now let's look at what the sensitive information really was. So for that, you would need to run, you would need to ls, s3 sync, and run this to check as to what the sensitive information is. So let me go back and cat, I think, yeah, dot slash. And voila, here's where we've stolen things which could be very, very helpful to us, because you can actually copy all of this. Not actually, but an attacker could and has already copied things like these, and they've sold that onto dark web and earned some quick money out of it. So here's where we actually complete our red team, because us as an attacker, we have found some credit card details, CVV number, the name, the address, and a lot could be done out of it. So congratulations, you were perfect attackers today. And this completes our red team exercise for today. And we actually went on to exploiting the vulnerability, got hold of the role, got permanent credentials, escalated privileges, found an S3 bucket in Capital 2 Financial Services, downloaded this S3 into Kali Linux, and found some credit card details that we could, of course, go on and sell it on dark web. So it was perfect today to have all of you and run with you being an attacker. So I see we have time on the clock. Is there any question that we can take, or any challenges that you may have faced today?
Yeah, guys, I would all thank you very much, Radhika. From my side, I would just encourage you guys to come off mute if you like. As Radhika says, we've got time left, and it's a good opportunity to ask any questions you might have. Yes, it's great that you guys have had so few issues and been able to just fly through the content so well. Oh, I can see Peter's come off mute. Peter, have you got any questions?
Yeah, I mean, in a broader sense, obviously this has been all staged, so we hit gold pretty much immediately, right? So in a broader sense, I was already asking about IMDS vulnerability, like in general, outside the cloud, for example. I mean, how common it is to stumble upon things like this, because I'm familiar with Kali, and I used Metasploit in the past, and I know that there's rarely a perfect world out there.
Sure.
Yeah, Nick, would you like to take that?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, no, I get it, Peter. I have made a note of your question from earlier. Thank you for reminding me. So you're right in that this is obviously a staged environment. We're looking to demonstrate how easy it is for cyber criminals to kind of do these things. I think an important point to be made here is that the dark web is full of examples of scripts and how to do these things. So hackers aren't necessarily really seasoned experts necessarily at this subject. They just are able to use examples that they purchased off the dark web and using tools that the more serious hackers have put together for them. Regarding your specific question and the use of this vulnerability, it is related to the instance metadata service kind of exploit or vulnerability, I guess, that exists within AWS. AWS they are aware of this vulnerability, and so they have released a second version, an updated version of the instance metadata service v2 that would block the use of this particular vulnerability. But as you say, it's a moving target. There's constantly stuff happening. There's always something new that the hackers can go after. And I think it's a bit of a moving target, really, in that sense. I think the important thing for us to be getting across as part of this course is the kind of basics of good hygiene in the public cloud. What we often refer to at Sophos, I know the guys at Bytes use this language as well, is the kind of shared responsibility of security in the cloud. It's getting the basics in place. That's not to say that you're ever going to be perfect and there's not going to be any vulnerabilities within your environment, but you're certainly by covering the basic steps of having a firewall if you're using the public cloud and wanting to protect services behind a web application firewall, as Radhika mentioned earlier on the call, around using CSPM tools that we're obviously going to look at tomorrow as part of the blue team exercise. You're making it more difficult for criminals. They're going to move on to the next victim or next target because they ultimately just want to go after the easiest solution. That's not to say that some nation state attack or some really high profile cyber gang isn't going to target your organization and find some other vulnerability, but at least if you can protect yourselves against the masses, I think that's a really good step in the right direction here.
Absolutely, Nick. And also, Peter, I think just to let you know, this was also based on a real attack that was the basics of what we've covered today is actually based on a real attack that took place in AWS some time back. So we actually wanted to replicate and make everyone go through as to what an attacker in that scenario would have done. So yeah, there were quite a lot of clues involved into this because of course this was into a particular time frame. But the basics of it was actually based on a real attack that took place. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. And if there are any questions, please feel free to contact Bytes and also Public Cloud at Sophos, and we'd be happy to take on any questions. So and also for everybody's information, tomorrow we're going to run day 2 of the exercise, which were to actually on how you would be as a defender and how you would implement optics and use the recommendations of optics to make changes into your capital 2 company in AWS, and how you could have actually prevented such an attack from taking place. So that is going to be day 2 for us, and so please join in tomorrow, and we really look forward to seeing you tomorrow. So thank you. If there are no questions further, I think we've got some 15 minutes back of the day for all of us.
Yeah, Janara, I can see you come off mute, mate. Are you hoping to do a bit of a wrap up and close out the session this afternoon?
Yeah, no, happy to. So no, thank you guys from Sophos for of course running that. I was following every single step, and no, it's definitely a good exercise to see. I think just to illustrate some of the points that were made is, in a perfect world, I don't think an attacker is going to stumble across that kind of gold that quickly, but this definitely helps to convey how easy it could be, for attackers, and why security in the cloud is just as important as your security on-prem. So it's definitely an eye-opener, if anything. And from my side, definitely looking forward to seeing how we can use some of the Sophos stack to prevent these kind of attacks and exploitations from happening. But in terms of everyone joined in today, thank you so much for joining. Looking forward to seeing you guys tomorrow, and I think that's me.
Thanks, Gennaro. Thank you everybody for joining today. Sorry, Nick, go ahead.
No, at all. You go ahead.
I was just thanking everybody for taking out time today, because I know 2 hours is a good chunk of time. But thank you so much for joining, and it was great fun.
Yeah, and thank you, Radhika, again. Yeah, much appreciated. Cheers, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Radhika. See you guys tomorrow.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.